going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today, let's start talking a little bit about this weekend's Romania MuscleFest Pro. Because I think there's been a little bit of confusion about which show Chris is doing and which guys are doing which show. Because this weekend is Romania, and the main two guys that we're looking at in Romania are Rafael Brandao and Akim Williams. And I've seen a lot of people comparing Chris to both of those two guys. And while there's a chance we see them do Prague, which is the following weekend after this coming weekend, right now we only know for sure that they're doing this weekend's Romania show. So I want to talk about Rafael Brandao first, because in the Romania lineup, from who we know so far, Rafael is the highest Olympia placer in that lineup, and this is the latest update from him at 7 days out from the Romania show. Now, I think Romania is actually going to be a very exciting show in and of itself, even though a lot of the excitement people are kind of directing towards the Prague show, because you've got Chris doing that show, Chris Bumstead. But I have a feeling that the top two at Romania is going to be very, very close, because the top two, I think, is going to be Akim and Rafael. And I think Rafael looks really good in his updates as well. We're going to talk about Akim in a second, but 8th place at the Olympia, Rafael. And even though I think some people were disappointed that he wasn't higher than 8th, it was still his best Olympia placing ever. And I think he looked incredible at the Olympia, but I still don't think he was quite there to be top 6. So I think 8th was a good placing for him. It was still an improvement from his previous best, which was 10th. And I thought he brought a very competitive package at the Olympia. Now, I guess the question is, how close will the package be that he brings at Romania to the package that he brought at the Olympia? And I guess the other question is, if he loses the Romania show to Akim, will he potentially go on to compete in Prague as well to try again to get that early Olympia qualification? Or maybe he's already planning on going to Prague, whether he wins or loses in Romania. But I don't think we know officially either way yet. So I think when talking about Rafael as the favorite for this show, I think you go off the highest Olympia placing, and you also go off the fact that Rafael has already won this show in the past, so he's kind of a returning champ to the Romania show. So I think he is the favorite. However, I also want to talk about Akim Williams in this video, because Akim has been looking extremely impressive. In particular, the latest update that Akim posted, this front double bicep shot, is just such a gnarly looking front double bicep. I mean, frankly, Akim looks great here, and honestly, I think Akim looks better in some of these progress pictures than he looked in the progress pictures that we saw going into the Olympia. And Akim being a guy that has struggled a lot with conditioning, or at least with being consistent with his conditioning, he seems like the type of guy that would do very well by peaking for a show like the Olympia and then continuing to diet for another 3 weeks into another show. I feel like he would be one of those guys that would benefit from just extending that prep 3 more weeks and bringing out a little bit extra detail, because to me, he looks really impressive. His legs from the front look really, really detailed, really shredded. And we talked about this before with Akim, is typically when you see physique updates from Akim, they're from the side, because I think the side poses are really his strongest shots. You can see a lot of detail in his legs from the side. He looks very thick and wide from the side and the upper body as well. And this is something that's been true for like every prep that Akim's done in the past couple of years. The side shots are what we see a lot of. So for him to be posting, front double biceps, and over the course of the last week, he's posted a side shot, he's posted a back shot, he's posted a most muscular. So for him to be posting all these different angles of his physique, it's not something he typically does going into a show. So I think Akim is very confident in how he's looking going into Romania. And he's also just not a very frequent poster in general when it comes to physique updates, no matter what the show is, even for the Olympia. So for him to have posted, 4 physique updates in the last week, I think is kind of telling that he knows he looks good, and he does. And so I guess my point in saying that is Akim and Rafael were only separated by one placing, which was 9th. Rafael was 8th, Akim was 10th at the Olympia. So even though Rafael's the favorite at this Romania show, what if Akim comes in looking a lot better than he looked at the Olympia? He's got a real chance at winning this thing. So that's why I think this top 2 has potential to be really solid and really competitive because Akim looks great. You know, we've talked a lot about Rafael over the last year and all the improvements he's made. I think we can all agree he looks good. We haven't talked as much about Akim, but I'm looking at these updates and I'm thinking, man, he's got a shot here at potentially even beating Rafael. And Akim actually did confirm in his comment section because, again, he's one of the guys that I saw a lot of people comparing to Chris Bumstead. He did specifically confirm in his comments that he is only doing Romania, so it looks like we're not going to see him in Prague. But I've seen a lot of people compare his physique to Chris Bumstead. They're not doing the same show, so just to alleviate some of that confusion, Akim is only doing Romania. Now, next up in the news, I also saw that yesterday Andrew Jacked did a guest posing. He's not a guy you get to see guest pose very frequently. It certainly looks like he's been eating since the Olympia. He certainly looks big here. We know that his next show is going to be the Arnold Classic. He's already said he plans on doing the Arnold. There was kind of that whole debacle with his posing music at the Olympia that seemed to really upset him. So we know for a fact the Arnold, Ohio is the next show on his radar. But I kind of wonder, I wanted to ask you guys what you guys think the future holds for Andrew Jacked. You know, a couple years ago, earlier in their careers, a lot of people were kind of putting Samson and Andrew in the same category as a tall, heavy, aesthetic, open bodybuilder. And we've seen Samson be able to make massive jumps in his placings to the point where he won the Olympia this year. But Andrew seems to be kind of stagnating in the sense that he tied his Olympia placing from last year. He was 5th last year in 2023. And he was 5th this year again in 2024. And I think, you know, we did see improvements from Andrew for sure, especially when it comes to adding size in the lower body. But conditioning-wise, I kind of look back at the 2023 Olympia. I think the conditioning was about the same. So even with improvements, he got the same placing. So that's why I kind of wanted to ask you guys and get a little bit of a temperature check, is what is the hype train for Andrew Jacked looking like right now, with him being 39 years old? Do you think we're going to start to see those massive jumps, or do you think he's going to be one of those guys that's like an uncrowned Olympia type of physique that never quite made it to, you know, a top 2 spot at the Olympia or something like that? Because like I said, he is a little bit older. He's 39, and we're just not seeing these big jumps and placings for him to get to a position to win the Olympia. I know a lot of people see him as a future Olympia champ. But what are we going to see those necessary jumps for him to win the Olympia? Because we saw that from Samson, and we're kind of seeing Andrew, you know, stay in that same range or the exact same placing as last year in this case. Although, to Andrew's credit, the year prior in 2022, he was 8th, so he went from 8th to 5th. Now he's kind of staying at 5th. So do you guys think in the next year or two we see Andrew make another jump from 5th to maybe a top 3 position, or do you see him staying in that 5th range? And again, I kind of wonder if it's an Andrew thing or if it's a coaching thing or a combination of both, because I mean, you see pictures of Andrew, you know, even just in a tank top, and he is one of the freakiest, like most 3D round, just insane muscle bellies on this guy's physique. Like, he just doesn't look like anybody else. He's got one of the craziest physiques I've ever seen. But will he put it together to the extent that he wins the Olympia is the question. I think it's without question that he has the genetics to do it. It's just a question of will he do it. And also, in Andrew's defense, I kind of wonder to what extent the mix-up with the posing music at the Olympia maybe messed him up a little bit. But then let's talk about a guy that made his Olympia debut in open bodybuilding this year, and a guy that we are going to see next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend, go on stage in Prague against Chris Bumstead, and that would be Martin Fitzwater. And that's kind of the interesting thing about Martin, is he got 4th at his first Olympia ever. And being shorter and smaller than Andrew Jacked, beat Andrew Jacked, which I think also contributes to the conversation about Andrew being in fifth and also being beaten by a guy that just made his Olympia debut that is objectively smaller than Andrew. But these are some recent physique updates of Martin Fitzwater at about 2 weeks out now from that Prague show, where he's also going to have to face Shaun, Clarida, Horse MD, Chris Bumstead, and I'm telling you, I think there's going to be a lot of other names added to that list because people recognize this as a big opportunity where there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this show. And I think it was a little bit of a funny update, maybe poking some fun at his friend Chris Bumstead, because in these updates, he's hitting a bunch of classic poses, and he mentions, how much am I over my classic weight cap? What classic poses should I hit in my routine? So it looks like he's having fun with this, and not only are we going to get to see Chris Bumstead in bodybuilding, but it looks like we might see Martin Fitzwater hit some classic poses, at least in his finals routine, maybe. So I really think this will turn out to be one of the most interesting shows of the year, because you've got a former 212 Mr. Olympia, Shaun Clarida, you've got a top 4 open bodybuilder, and you've got the current classic physique Mr. Olympia champ, Chris Bumstead. So you're going to get to see very, very different physiques compared for this Prague Pro title. And as much as I love Chris, I do think Martin is the favorite going into this Prague show. And I saw some pretty cool comparisons we'll talk about in a second, but first we'll talk about the latest physique update from Shaun Clarida. He did, it looks like maybe a little bit of a seminar or something at the Dragon's Lair gym with Flex Lewis, because you can hear a bunch of people clapping in the background when he finishes posing. But you get, again, kind of a 2 weeks out update from him before Prague. And Shaun is a little bit of a wild card in the sense that he looks so much smaller than these other guys, but when you're talking about pound for pound, the amount of muscle that he has on his frame, he does have his frame proportionally really well filled out. And a lot of the guys that are going to be a lot bigger than him, like Chris, for example, when you're talking about bigger just in terms of sheer body weight, a lot of that is because of Chris's height. But I do think we saw a little bit of a different version of Shaun, and I guess the question is, will him and his new coach, Boss of Outlaw, be able to correct some of those things in what seems to be the very short amount of time that they've been working together? But, I mean, the imbalance in the legs, I think his chest looked significantly smaller. It was already kind of a weak point for him, but I think his chest, and even in this posing video, you can see what I mean. The chest just looks so small in this video. But you know he's going to bring crazy, gnarly conditioning, so that's going to be a strong point for him. But this is open bodybuilding, so size has more of a factor here than in 212. Conditioning is only going to carry Shaun so far. But then I think back to the Arnold Classic that Shaun Clarida did in open bodybuilding. He did the 2023 Arnold, competed in open, and he was 5th, so it wasn't a great placing. But he was 5th behind Samson, Nick, Andrew, Jacked, and Big Ramy. So really the biggest, freakiest guys were the guys that beat him there. Andrew, Ramy, Nick. But he did beat Akim Williams, William Bonac, Justin Rodriguez, Kamala Gargany, and Patrick Moore at that Arnold Classic. And then, of course, we had also seen Shaun Clarida do the Legion show and win that show in open bodybuilding. Qualified for the Open Olympia and opted not to do the Open Olympia, obviously. But I saw a great comparison video of Shaun and Chris and they even put the Prague Pro stage on the background, which I thought was cool. And it might not be the most fair comparison to use Olympia footage of Shaun and Chris, because obviously both of them are going to look different at this Prague show compared to what they looked like at the Olympia, because obviously in Prague, neither one of them now have a weight cap that they need to meet. So I'm expecting to see a much fuller look from both of them. Obviously, it's a very short amount of time between the Olympia and Prague, so you're probably not going to see a whole lot or maybe any muscle added at all, but probably just a fuller look from both of them. And the reason that I point back to that Arnold Classic 2023 example where Shaun Clarida took 5th, because I think that obviously Shaun will have incredible conditioning even at this Prague show. But I think that Arnold Classic placing showed that size is very important in men's open bodybuilding. Conditioning is obviously important as well. But at that Arnold, you saw Big Ramy and Andrew Jacked placed directly ahead of Shaun Clarida. Obviously, I don't think anybody thought that Big Ramy or Andrew Jacked was in better condition than Shaun. but they were bigger, taller, heavier guys. And that was a clear example, I think, of size overwhelming Shaun's conditioning. Now, to be fair, at this show, I don't think you're going to have that big of a difference of a big Rami versus Shaun or an Andrew Jacked versus Shaun, because, these guys are big, but Martin is not, big Rami sized. Even Chris, being probably about the same height as Andrew Jacked, is clearly not as big as Andrew Jacked. But I think, again, using that Arnold Classic example, Nick Walker also placed ahead of Shaun Clarida, and Nick is also a shorter guy, but he was in good shape, round, full muscle. And I think that's a good comparison with Martin being a bigger, fuller, open guy compared to Shaun. If Martin's in shape and he's round and he's full, arguably Martin would beat Shaun like Nick did by 3 placings at the Arnold. But then I think as you watch this comparison of Chris and Shaun, even though they both have weight caps, a classic weight cap and a 212 weight cap, I think the size difference is still pretty crazy between Chris and Shaun. How much significantly bigger Chris looks. Will Shaun's conditioning be enough to catch him up? I honestly don't think so. And by the way, even as I'm recording this video, Chris looks to be the heaviest guy in this lineup. I just saw a post where apparently Chris just weighed in at 118 kilos at less than 2 weeks out from Prague, which is slightly over 260 pounds. And Martin weighed in at 108 kilos, which is 239 pounds. So even right now, and again, there's a big height difference that does factor in here, but Chris is more than 20 pounds heavier than Martin. 260 is not small, even for open. And I think even adjusted for Chris's height, it's not small. And I believe Martin is 5'7", so Chris is a full 7 inches taller than Martin, which is a very significant height difference to account for that 20 pounds difference. But Chris at 260, but I think you also have to consider that with classic physique, they weigh in the day before the Olympia, before they actually compete. So with Chris's weight limit in classic being 241, a lot of people are saying, well, he's 20 pounds heavier already. That's a big difference. Obviously, Chris weighs more than 241 on stage at the Classic Physique Olympia. I would say he probably weighs closer to 250 than 240 when he's on stage in Classic Physique. And then he's still got 2 more weeks of dieting before Prague. So I would say he'd probably be more like 5 to 10 pounds heavier on stage than he is at the Olympia, not necessarily 20 pounds heavier. But still, 260 at 2 weeks out for Chris Bumstead is definitely a significantly bigger version, but I don't think he's going to be 20 pounds of stage weight heavier. But we'll see. Again, you watch this comparison of Chris versus Martin from the Olympia, and I believe this was posted by Buys and Tries and Dynamite D on Instagram, the side-by-side here, which, again, you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. They're not going to look the same as they did at the Olympia, or at least Chris is definitely not going to. But I think the point, even in this comparison, with Chris still having his weight restriction for Classic, the size difference is not that crazy between him and Martin. And I mean, as far as Martin being an open guy versus a Classic guy, Martin doesn't look that much different than Chris in terms of size. Like, it's not like he looks overwhelmingly more muscular. So this is not going to be something that's impossible for Chris to pull off. I do think it's going to be a challenge for him. Like I've said, I don't think this will be an easy win for Chris. I think a lot of people do think it will be. But I think, like I said, if Chris wins and beats a top 4 open Olympian, I think it's probably the most impressive story of the year, especially when you consider the turnaround time from the Olympia competing in Classic Physique to competing in open bodybuilding a month later. Literally no time to prepare to make that transition. It really would, I think, probably be the most impressive bodybuilding result of the year. And I want to double down and say that, again, I think if Chris is able to pull that off, with basically no preparation for Open. You know, I want Chris to be healthy. I want him to spend time with his family. I want him to enjoy his retirement. But if with no preparation other than, you know, the month in between, he's able to beat a top 4 Open Olympian, just the bodybuilding fan in the back of my mind just wants to see Chris compete in the Open Olympia, because he will earn his qualification if he wins. He would have the whole year to prepare. He's got Hani Rambod in his corner, who successfully made that transition for Derek Lunsford in an even shorter amount of time than a year. So if anybody could do it for him, it would be Hani. And then I think going into that Olympia, Chris has a realistic shot at being a top 3 Olympian in open bodybuilding at his first Olympia ever. But again, that is assuming he is able to beat Martin here. And it wouldn't entirely be going against his retirement, because technically he retired from Classic Physique. But I am excited to see what the final list for Prague ends up being, because I have a feeling there's going to be some surprises in there. Like I said, I think it's a pretty big spotlight, and I think you're going to see some guys come out of the woodwork, some open guys that think, oh, I've got a chance to knock off Chris Bumstead here. He's a Mr. Olympia champ in a different division. I've got a chance to make a name for myself here. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. We've got a very exciting upcoming 2 weeks of bodybuilding competitions here that you guys don't want to miss. So make sure you like, subscribe, click that bell, notification icon, all that good stuff. And as always, I love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at Nick Strength Power. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.